Kia ora and welcome. My name is Ellen Rose and this is the Creative Cure to Boredom. I've created this channel to share and explore some inventive approaches to art using everyday materials you can find in your own home. The hope is that it makes the current lockdown and isolation situation just a little bit more bearable. Now today we're going to have a bit of an explore with turning catalogues to collage. So all you'll need is some old magazines that you don't want anymore, some scissors, a board or a piece of paper to stick it down to, and if you'd like, some wax paper to trace your design as well. Hope you enjoy this video. Cheers! So I'm doing the same technique that I've done in the previous video where I cover the back of an image with a pencil with graphite and then I draw over the top of it to get the basic outline. Now I'm using just the back of a art paper book, so I'm just using some basic cardboard as the backing for my picture. And when I've drawn over the photograph, I've actually used a pen without the ink coming out. So I'm just getting the outline without actually drawing on the image, so I can still use this image as a reference tool. I've decided to go a bit abstract for the background, so I've got lots of different coloured greys that I'm using, and I'm just sort of tearing them up in a bit of a haphazard fashion to try to get a basic gradation similar to the picture. Now I'm going to block out some of the lines of the picture so I can work in one section at a time. So I'll do the wrap around her head last to frame everything, but I'll start with her face. So you can see I've made a 1 and a 2 mark there, so that's to indicate the lightest sections of her face. And I've got a collection of different coloured magazine pieces that I'm using, and the initial part that I was using for the lightest colour on her face was actually, I think it was a buttercream or something like that, but I decided it was a bit too yellow, so later in the video you'll see that I swapped this out for something else in the end. But I'm using beach scenes, I'm using smoky skies, I'm using some skin colour, but I find it more interesting to use some different kind of images to create skin rather than just using skin from other images. So you can see that I'm trying to pick out some of the shapes in her face, and I'm trying to block that out in colour tones, so that gradation from light to dark. So if you're finding any of the shapes a little bit too hard to guesstimate by eye, you can always put them on top of the image to try to gauge it against the original, or you can use some of the wax paper to actually draw on top of the image and get a definite cutout that you can then use on top of paper. So I will use that technique for the eyes and the lips, you'll see later in the video. It's a really handy technique to use if you're having trouble getting a certain shape. I'm trying to get in some of the shadow around her face to help frame her face at the moment. That'll help guide sort of where some of the other colours are going. It can be more useful to put down the dark tones first and then put the light tones over the top. But for this picture, I started working from the left to the right, so I did start with the lighter tones. And here you see that I'm using the greaseproof paper to get a more accurate cutout of her lips. And that's because the lips and the eyes really do hold a lot of the personality of someone or the expression that they're holding, and so I want to make sure that they're accurate, so I don't just want to guess those ones. It is handy to use the colours across the whole face, so if I'm using the orange sky in one section, I'll be wanting to use it across those same tones across the face, just to tie the whole picture in together. Otherwise it can look a bit disjointed. And admittedly, the colour that I put down as sort of the darker tone on the chin, I've only used down there and nowhere else on the face, and that's a little bit of a regret because that does stand out at the end. And you can see I'm using the same sort of technique that I did for the lips, for the eyes, to make sure that I get those shapes pretty accurate. And I'm constantly looking back at the picture to make sure I'm picking the right tones and the right sort of shapes for her face, for her hair. So I have two pieces of black that I'm working between, and one is a hair commercial, and so it has that sort of hair shine to it, and one is a flat black. And I'm just using a combination of both of these to pick up those highlights and those depths in her hair. And actually part of that flat black too is the top of an esky. And that was sort of real bumpy. It almost looked like diamantes, so I ended up using that as the detailing in the top of her shirt. So it's great if you can work with your cutouts. If there are little characteristics in your cutouts that could be used to mimic details in your picture, it goes a long way to help. So like this, I'm using a picture of a rose as her wrap over her hair, and that is picking up some of the creases in the wrap, because you've got the creases in the rose petals as well. I've also decided to tear some images of the beach to show that little frayed edge around that as well, and I actually think that that's quite effective. You can use pretty much any 2D material to collage with. Be wary though that thick materials are harder to rip, and so you might not get the lines that you really want from them. But newspapers, magazines, even photographs or printouts are really great sort of materials to use for this. So this is the final result. There are some things that I quite like, and there are some things that I don't think worked quite so well. So the shading on the neck I think is really nice. The eyes and the mouth I think are quite true to the same shaped eyes and mouth on the photograph. So that helps to capture her expression. I had a lot of fun with the background. Although the background doesn't look so realistic, it was a lot of fun to do. Things that I don't think are working well are the chin in particular. I think the colours are a little bit too different. So you're not getting that gradation that looks more natural. I do think that I mixed feelings about the wrap around her head. Some of the folds I think work quite nicely, but I do think that brown on the bottom left is just a little bit too dark for the overall feel of it. Anyway, this is just a basic walkthrough of some different techniques that you can do with collage. I hope you've enjoyed the video. I'd love to hear if you've tried a collage as well. So please do leave message or comments below. And of course, if you have any other suggestions for materials, I'd love to hear them. This has been the Creative Cure to Boredom with Ellen Rose. Hope you've enjoyed the video. Till next time, ngā mihi nui.